Welcome to the English listening practice. Today, we have an amazing story for you. It's a great way to improve your English while listening to something truly fascinating.
That's right. We're going to tell you about Max Planck, a German scientist. He was a man who loved order and tradition. But he accidentally started a revolution that changed science forever.
It's a story of incredible genius, but also deep personal tragedy. He discovered a secret of the universe, but lost almost everyone he loved.
This story is very interesting and you will learn a lot of useful English vocabulary. Be sure to listen to the very end.
Let's start on December 14th, 1900, in Berlin. The German Physical Society is having a meeting. At this time, scientists felt they understood almost everything about physics. The laws of Newton and Maxwell seemed to explain the whole world. Most scientists believed there were only a few small problems left to solve. A professor named Max Planck is about to give a speech. He is 42 years old and a very respectable and traditional man. He strongly believed in absolute and unchanging laws of nature.
Professor Planck is here to explain a formula he created. His formula perfectly solved a puzzle called black-body radiation. But he felt his own explanation was not good enough. He later called it an act of desperation. To make his formula work, he had to make a very strange assumption. This idea went against everything physicists believed. He had to imagine that energy was not a smooth, continuous flow. Instead, he suggested it came in tiny, separate packets. He called these packets quanta.
As Planck starts to speak, nobody in the room understands the importance of his idea. Not even Planck himself. This quiet, traditional man has just discovered a secret of the universe. This secret will break the foundations of the world he knew. He is about to unwillingly start the age of quantum mechanics. He was a revolutionary who didn't want to be one. His life of searching for order would strangely mirror the chaos and tragedy he would later face.
To understand Planck, you must understand the world he came from. He was born in Kiel, Germany, in 1858. His family was part of the German establishment, full of scholars and civil servants. His grandfather and great-grandfather were theology professors. His father was a professor of law. From his family, Planck learned to believe in a world governed by laws. The laws of God, the laws of the state, and the laws of nature. His family valued duty, honesty, and tradition.
When Max was 9, his family moved to Munich. He went to a special school for gifted children. He was a hard-working student and was good at everything. But he had an amazing talent for two subjects, mathematics and music. He was an excellent musician. He could play the piano, organ, and cello, and he even composed music. For Planck, music was not just a hobby, it was a source of peace and happiness.
The classical music Planck loved is full of mathematical order and rules. In this music, logic and beauty are connected. When he was 17, he had to choose what to study. He considered music, but ultimately chose physics. He chose physics because he believed it was the best way to find the universe's harmony. He wanted to understand the most basic rules of the world. He was searching for the music of the universe itself.
A math teacher named Hermann Müller encouraged him. Müller taught him how to visualize the laws of physics in his mind. From Müller, Planck first learned about the conservation of energy. This idea struck him like a message. Here was a law of nature that was absolute and never changed. It became the foundation of his life's work. It was the starting point for a journey that would lead him to incredible places.
In 1874, Planck started at the University of Munich. He was ready to find the absolute laws of the physical world. But physics at the time felt almost complete. He asked his professor, Philipp von Jolly, for advice. Jolly told him, "In this field, almost everything is already discovered." He said only a few small gaps were left to fill. This seems silly today, but it was a common belief back then. Planck was not discouraged. He replied that he just wanted to understand the fundamentals.
Planck spent a year studying in Berlin, the center of German physics. He attended lectures by famous physicists Helmholtz and Kirchhoff. But he was very disappointed. He found their lectures to be boring, dry, and full of mistakes. So, instead of learning from them, he went to the library. He started to study the original work of a scientist named Rudolf Clausius. In the writings of Clausius, Planck found the clarity and deep ideas he was looking for. This period of studying alone made him an independent thinker.
While studying, Planck became fascinated with the second law of thermodynamics. This law is about entropy, which is a measure of disorder. The first law of thermodynamics says energy is conserved. But the second law says that disorder in the universe always increases. For example, heat always flows from hot to cold. A broken egg will not put itself back together. For Planck, this was another beautiful absolute law. It became the subject of his doctoral thesis in 1879.
Planck received his doctorate at the young age of 21. But for years, he struggled to find a paid job as a professor. He became an unpaid lecturer in Munich. He wrote many papers on entropy, but the scientific community ignored him. He felt intellectually isolated. The top scientists didn't read his work or they disagreed with it. For years, he worked alone, believing only in the importance of his own research.
While his professional life was a struggle, his personal life was a joy. In 1885, he finally got a job as a professor at the University of Kiel. With a steady income, he could finally start a family. In 1887, he married his sweetheart, Marie Merck. This was the beginning of the happiest time in Planck's life. They had 4 children: Karl, the twins Emma and Greta, and Erwin. Planck was a loving husband and father who cherished his family time.
In 1889, Planck's career took a huge step forward. He was offered a position at the University of Berlin, the best in Germany. He quickly became a full professor and a top member of the scientific community. His lectures were famous for their amazing clarity. One student called him the best lecturer I ever heard. The Planck family moved to a nice house in a Berlin suburb. Their home became a center for social and intellectual gatherings.
Planck loved having company and hosted many parties. Colleagues, artists, and friends would gather for conversation and music. His friend Lise Meitner remembered him as a cheerful man. She saw him playing tag with his children in the garden. Often, the house was filled with music. Planck would play the piano, sometimes with his son and a visiting violinist named Albert Einstein. This was the high point of Planck's life, a world of perfect order and happiness.
The problem that Planck started to work on in Berlin was a simple question. Why do hot objects glow? Everyone knew that when you heat an iron poker, it first glows red, then orange, then white. The color of the glow is related to the temperature. The challenge was to find one mathematical law to predict the exact colors at any temperature. To make it simpler, scientists imagined a perfect object called a black body. A black body absorbs all light that hits it, and it is also a perfect emitter of light.
By the late 1890s, scientists had good measurements of black body radiation. But their theories could not explain the measurements. One theory, Wien's law, worked for high-frequency light like blue and violet, but it failed for low-frequency infrared light. Another theory, the Rayleigh-Jeans law, was based on classical physics. It worked perfectly for low-frequency light, but for high-frequency light, it gave a ridiculous result. It predicted that a hot object should release an infinite amount of energy. This absurd prediction was called the ultraviolet catastrophe.
In 1900, new experiments proved that Wien's law was wrong at long wavelengths. Planck had based his work on this law, so he had to start over. He knew how the formula should look at both high and low frequencies. In what he called a lucky intuition, he simply connected the two ideas together. He created a new, hybrid formula. He presented it at a meeting on October 19, 1900. That night, his colleague checked the formula against the data. It was a perfect match.
Planck had found the correct law, but a lucky guess wasn't enough for him. He needed to prove it from basic principles. For the next 2 months, he did the hardest work of his life. To succeed, he had to make 2 radical changes to his beliefs. First, he had to accept that the second law of thermodynamics was about probability, not certainty. This was a bitter pill for a man who searched for absolute laws. The second change was even bigger.
To make his calculations work, he had to make a strange new assumption. He imagined that energy was not continuous. Instead, he proposed it could only be released in tiny, indivisible packets. He called these packets quanta. The energy of each packet, E, was proportional to its frequency, nu. The formula was simple. E equals h times nu. H was a new, tiny, fundamental constant of nature, now called Planck's constant. This was his act of desperation. With this idea, his formula worked perfectly. On December 14, 1900, he presented his theory, and modern physics was born.
Planck had solved the problem, but he didn't like his own solution. He thought his quantum idea was just a mathematical trick. 4 years, he tried to make it fit with classical physics. But in 1905, a young patent clerk named Albert Einstein changed everything. Einstein took Planck's idea very seriously. He proposed that light itself is made of these energy particles, later called photons. Einstein was the first to treat the quantum as a physical reality.
Planck was an editor for a top physics journal. He immediately recognized Einstein's genius, even though Einstein was unknown. He became the biggest supporter of Einstein's theory of relativity in Germany. They were complete opposites. Planck was a formal, conservative insider. Einstein was an informal, rebellious outsider. But they were united by their search for truth and their love of music. Planck's support for Einstein showed his great intellectual honesty.
The turning point for the quantum idea came at a conference in Brussels in 1911. All the greatest scientists were there: Planck, Einstein, Marie Curie, and others. The topic was the theory of radiation and the quanta. The debates were intense. After the conference, the great mathematician Henri Poincaré proved something important. He showed that Planck's formula was impossible without the quantum hypothesis. After this, most scientists finally accepted the idea. The quantum was no longer a trick. It was real. The revolution Planck had reluctantly started was now happening.
Now, we need to talk about Planck's personal life. As his scientific revolution was growing, his private world started to fall apart. He experienced a terrible series of tragedies. Let's review the timeline of his life. He married Marie in 1887, and they had 4 children. In 1900, he discovered his famous quantum hypothesis. But in 1909, his beloved wife Marie died. He won the Nobel Prize in 1918, a huge honor. But around this time, 3 of his children died one by one. The final tragedy was in 1945, when his last son, Erwin, was executed. His life was a painful mix of scientific success and personal loss.
The first tragedy struck in 1909. Planck's wife, Marie, died of tuberculosis after 22 years of happy marriage. He was heartbroken. 2 years later, the 53-year-old Planck remarried. His second wife, Marga, was his first wife's niece. But then the Great War, World War I, started in 1914. Planck was a patriot and supported Germany. His oldest son, Karl, became a soldier. In 1916, Karl was killed in action at the Battle of Verdun. Planck wrote that he only knew his son's true value when he had to lose him.
The tragedies continued with cruel timing. In 1917, his daughter Greta died giving birth to her child. The next year, 1918, he was awarded the Nobel Prize in Physics. It was the greatest achievement of his career. But that triumph was followed by more pain. In 1919, his other daughter, Emma, also died in childbirth. In a terrible twist of fate, Emma had married her dead sister's husband. In just 10 years, Planck had lost his wife and 3 of his 4 children.
After World War I, Planck was the most respected scientist in Germany. He was a conservative man who loved his country, but he tried to stay out of politics. But when the Nazi Party came to power in 1933, that became impossible. At first, Planck hoped Hitler would become more moderate. That hope was destroyed very quickly. The Nazis passed a law to fire all Jewish people from government jobs, including universities. The effect on German science was a disaster.
Many of Planck's Jewish friends and colleagues were fired. German physics was destroyed, as many of its best scientists were Jewish. People like Albert Einstein and Lise Meitner had to flee the country. Planck felt it was his duty to stay and protect German science. In May 1933, he arranged a meeting with Adolf Hitler. He argued that forcing Jewish scientists to leave would destroy German science. Hitler did not listen. He flew into a rage. Hitler screamed, "If the dismissal of Jewish scientists means the annihilation of German science, then we shall do without science for a few years." Planck learned that reason meant nothing against a violent ideology.
During these dark times, Planck's only comfort was his son, Erwin. Erwin was his father's closest friend. Erwin hated the Nazi regime and was part of the resistance. On July 20th, 1944, a plot to assassinate Hitler failed. The Nazis arrested thousands of people in response. Erwin Planck was arrested by the Gestapo. For Max Planck, now 86 years old, this was the final terrible blow. His home had already been destroyed in a bombing, along with all his books and papers. Now his last son was a prisoner.
Erwin was put on trial and sentenced to death. Max Planck, the great scientist, tried one last desperate act. He wrote a personal letter to Adolf Hitler. The letter was a heartbreaking plea from a father. He wrote, "My Führer, as the gratitude of the German people for my life's work, I am pleading for my son's life." He offered his entire scientific legacy in exchange for his son. The plea was ignored. On January 23, 1945, Erwin Planck was executed. Friends said this final loss destroyed Max Planck's will to live.
When the war ended in 1945, Max Planck was 87 years old. He was a refugee in his own country. American forces rescued him and his wife and took them to the city of Göttingen. He was a man destroyed by grief. He had outlived his wife and all 4 of their children. Yet he was asked to help one last time. The old German Research Society, the Kaiser Wilhelm Society, was connected to the Nazis. The Allies wanted to close it, but many wanted to save its history of great research. They turned to Planck, the one man whose integrity was perfect.
To signal a clean break from the past, the British proposed a solution. They would create a new research society. They suggested naming it after the one man who represented the best of German science. A man whose reputation was respected all over the world. They proposed to call it the Max Planck Society. Planck gave his consent from Göttingen. His name provided a bridge from a dark past to a hopeful future. He became a symbol of integrity that allowed German science to rebuild. The Max Planck Society was officially founded in 1948.
Max Planck died in Göttingen on October 4, 1947, at the age of 89. His gravestone is very simple. It has his name and the value of the constant he gave to the world. H. In his later years, he wrote a lot about philosophy and religion. He did not see a conflict between science and faith. He said both the scientist and the religious person start with faith. The scientist must have faith that the universe is rational and can be understood. For Planck, science and religion were two paths to the same ultimate reality.
Planck's life was a search for absolute, harmonious laws. His scientific journey took him into the strange new world of quantum mechanics. His personal journey took him through unbelievable loss and sorrow. But through it all, he remained a man of constant principle and duty. He discovered Planck's constant, H, which governs the quantum world. But he himself was also a constant man. He was a point of integrity in a century of chaos.
His life's work was a quest to understand the mind of the Creator. His final message, for both scientists and believers, was a simple one that defined his whole life: on to God.